possibly McLaughlin. Those would be the two that I would guess at this particular time might be the pick.
Well, Johnson had a problem, fell down a flight of stairs, so that's why the recent knee problem. And they really do need clarification, really. That's a risk at this point if teams haven't examined him personally. Defensive lineman on your board. Do you have a selection here, or could there be 2 or 3 of them?
At this point, Chris, what I look at is who the best football player is. And I think when you look at it, sure, Chet McLaughlin is, but he's somewhat of a gamble at this point. I think what the Dolphins have to look at is the guy that everybody had associated with their pick at 7, Alonzo Spellman, defensive end, Ohio State, who was viewed as somewhat of a gamble. He's a guy with great physical ability, didn't take over a game on a regular basis. The other guy you consider probably one of the best football players in the draft, Marco Coleman from Georgia Tech. Here's the opposite of Spellman. Here you have a guy who may be an overachiever type. He doesn't have the great 40 time like Alonzo Spellman, doesn't have the tremendous size. All he does is go out on that football field and just dominate and take over games and whip guys who have already been taken in the draft like a Bob Whitfield. So I think your debate here is, do you take the athlete in Spellman or the better football player in Marco Coleman?
Their defensive line, let's look at what the Dolphins have. And remember, Don Shula's got to be a little gun-shy. He's used high-round picks in recent years for Eric Kummerow, who never panned out. John Bosa, who had the knee problem, never really panned it out. Here's their defensive line as it stands going into this pick, with Oglesby and Turner and Cross, who's a good defensive end. Gerald Nichols, the former Jet. Tim Downey, but obviously they need impact player. Cross can be at times, was in one year, wasn't so much last year. But Dolphins, think about that AFC East now. The Buffalo Bills still have the best talent of anyone probably in the entire conference. But yet, after their second straight Super Bowl loss, if they fall some to the Jets and Miami, those sort of teams able to slide up. And how's Miami going to move up? Got to improve the defense.
Well, you know, Chris, one thing that Teddy Marchibroda told me flat out, he said, if the Miami Dolphins get themselves a quality pass rusher on defense, they automatically become a bona fide problem for that AFC East. Now, Coach Marchibroda had to, as the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, had to face him twice a year. He knows exactly what that football team is capable of doing, and he saw that if they get that one guy, they automatically jump right up and become a major problem for him. And Teddy's seen it as well as anybody.
I tell you what, I think the reason the Dolphins are taking almost all of their 15 minutes here, and they've got about a minute and a half to go, is that there is legitimately a lot of debate. Spellman and McLaughlin you put down, but Mel, I think it might be Porsche or Marco Coleman. May not be rated as high, but less of a, quote, gamble.
I think so. I think Marco Coleman, football player-wise, when we talked about Tommy Vardell being a great pick, so is Marco Coleman. He's just productive. You have to throw out those computer numbers sometime and just draft a football player. They already have Troy Vincent's a great athlete. Why not take a Marco Coleman over an Alonzo Spellman?
We say Coleman or Porsche. Let's see what the pick is.
With the 12th choice, the Miami Dolphins have selected Marco Coleman, linebacker, Georgia Tech. Dallas is next up.
And there's Marco Coleman from Georgia Tech. Played for Bobby Ross, who's now coach of the Chargers. I'm sure he's a proud guy right now. Would have liked to be able to draft his player. And I'll tell you, in years, the reason we're here with Marco Coleman, he was going to be our, quote, bubble man. Now, if you've watched our draft in recent years, Thurman Thomas was a bubble guy willing to go in first round, second round, ended up going in the second round. Mark Spindler, I mean, we all suffered with Mark a couple of years ago. Massey, the cornerback. Well, this year, before we even got the drama out, Marco Coleman, the bubble has burst. Marco Coleman is now a first-round selection, and I tell you, it adds up for the Dolphins. Less of a gamble, as you mentioned, Mel. McLaughlin, would he get too big? Spellman, sometimes great, sometimes we don't know. But Coleman and Porsche are more of put it down. They're the outside pass rush guy, and if they can complement Cross, he can be dangerous.
Well, PR-wise, Chris, when you look at drafting an Alonzo Spellman, a couple years ago they gambled on Eric Kummerow, same school, Ohio State. Spellman, a guy guy who had the physical tools but did not produce. Here with Coleman, you already had your 7th pick. You had Troy Vincent. Now you come back with a great football player, and here you see Marco Coleman. The size, he's up to about 257 now. He told me this past week he hasn't been running 5.05s, but in fact he's been running 4.8, 4.82. He gets around offensive tackles. You can move him up, move him down, use him like a Carl Mecklenburg in Denver. And for the Dolphins, who have on far too many occasions gambled on guys who are athletes, not necessarily football players, now they get a guy who fits the mold of what Don Shula wants, and that's a guy who's productive, intense. And when we hear Marco interviewed, probably in a few minutes to come, you'll hear a great kid, very well-spoken, intelligent. He can fit into any defensive structure because of the mental capacity that he brings to be able to pick up systems very quickly. And I think that's something you can't underestimate in a first-round draft choice.
And there's Marco as we look at him in Atlanta. And I'll tell you what, Marco Coleman was a linebacker at college, but he's projected as a pass-rushing defensive end, as so many of these guys are. And so now, I'll tell you what, the Miami Dolphins get exactly what they wanted. They've got the pass-rushing defensive end, and they got the corner. Speed was the question. Mel mentioned he ran about a 5, which is slow for that position, but Bobby Ross says, who cares?
Marco was one of the really productive football players that I've ever coached. He was a player that plays fast, even though in the eyes of some he may not have tested sprint-wise as well as a lot of people would like for him to have tested. He's a young man that plays fast. He plays in his football gear at a good speed and certainly well enough and quick enough and fast enough to play the game of football.
Bobby Ross ought to know, and he hopes he doesn't have to line up against him that many times, as Ross now the new head coach of the San Diego Chargers. Well, the 12th selection, that's a new record for our bubble man. That by far and away is the earliest any one of our bubble guys has gone. Marco Coleman now to the Miami Dolphins. Marco Polo was a discoverer. Marco Coleman has discovered Miami, and he's with Steve Cipher. Steve?
You're right about that, Chris. As far as crushing the bubble record, he crushed the pass sack record at the Georgia Tech as well. Marco, was it a complete surprise to you that you went number 12?
Yes, it was. I wasn't expecting to go as early as I did, you know, considering the times that I ran in the 40 and things like that. But like Coach Ross had mentioned, I feel I do have the speed to play.
Now, in the combine in Indianapolis, you ran a 5.12 40-yard dash. What have you run for Miami since, and when did that happen, and why the difference in times?
Well, I had 3 workouts in April, and each time I ran a 4.8 or better. And I had practiced with a track coach, you know, because I'm not a track runner. I play football, so, you know, I worked on it just like anything else. If you work on it, you get better at it.
Track coach being Lawrence Seagrave on your sprinting ability?
Yes, he helped me out a lot, and I give him a lot of credit.
Everybody's calling you a tweener. You know, you're 6'2 3/4", about 258 pounds this morning. Do you see yourself playing in a 2-point or down on the ground in a 3-point?
Well, I've been preparing myself really for whichever I have to do. So whatever position I fit best in the scheme of the Miami Dolphins, I'll be prepared to play.
When Miami talked with you, did they talk in terms of down lineman?
Well, a little bit of both. You know, basically about the same way I played at Georgia Tech. So like I said, I've been preparing for whichever position I have to play.
All right, fair enough. Now, what about Brian Ransom, your representative and the agent? What's the difference for a guy who's on the bubble, could go 26th, 27th, 28th, now he's the 12th pick in the draft? What difference does that mean in terms of money?
Well, at this point, it's hard to say what the difference would be. I think it's obvious that it's going to mean more money for Marco, and we look forward to getting him in camp on time. The biggest thing is for him to prepare and be ready to play when he does get there.
All right, fair enough. One question I have to ask you. You came out as a junior. Why did you come out early?
Well, probably the same reason as all the rest of the juniors. You know, you look forward to the competition, also the money, and, you know, and it's a lifelong dream. So at the earlier the chance, you know, the quicker the opportunity, you just can't help but to, you know, jump onto it.
The Georgia Tech teammate Ken Swilling last year could have come out, and many people said he would have been a first-round pick at the time. Instead, he elects to stay his senior year, and now he may be a second, third, fourth-round pick. Did that influence you?
No, it didn't. That was Ken's situation, and mine is different. You know, we both had totally different views on, you know, the circumstances and the situation. So what happened with him had no bearing on my decision.
All right, Marco, thank you very much. Congratulations.
So what's up to my pops in Dayton, Ohio? What's up, pops, and my brother and my sister? Yo, I'm in the house.
Whatever he said, we double it. Thank you, Brian. All right, back to you, Chris, in New York.
All right, Steve and Marco, congratulations. 12 picks made thus far. 6 of them are underclassmen. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. War Room Cam is smoking.
Courtesy Ford in Kendall is holding a massive red tag clearance sale.